Pastor, doesn't science disprove the Bible?
Isn't Genesis just a fairy tale?
Is God for real? Did he really create everything in 6 literal days?
Didn't God just use the Big Bang?
Why is there death and suffering? Do you really believe the Bible?
Didn't man evolve from apes?
For answers to these questions and more, stand by for Believing the Bible.
Welcome to Believing the Bible. This is Scott Lane with Terry Reed, Dr. Ken Harris, Dr. Carl Williams, and our producer, Jeremiah Rosenthal, all with the San Antonio Bible-Based Science Association. We are here to reassure you can believe the Bible from the very first verse. In our last episode, we started a skit about if Darrow had taken the stand in the Scopes Monkey trial, what could that interaction have looked like? Today we're going to complete that skit and then have a reaction of how this whole situation could be talked about today. Darrow, evolution is considered a theory by scientists.
Now, Brian's response is that a fact? Well, as Darwin's bulldog, Huxley, said, evolution could not be raised to the dignity of a theory until they find some species that had changed into another. And until then, it only qualifies as a hypothesis. Though it would be unlikely for you to agree with the prosecution, don't you at least agree with Huxley?
Huxley was from decades ago. Much has been discovered since then.
Oh, has it? Then let me ask you the same question you asked me. How old is the Earth?
Much older than starting at 4004 BC.
Okay, so you don't know. Then, what did Curtis say about the origin of the Earth and the heavenly bodies?
You're referring to Dr. Witherton Curtis, who has multiple degrees. He said that either the nebular hypothesis or the planetesimal hypothesis is correct, and that the heavenly bodies have reached their present state by an evolutionary stage continuous through an unfathomable past, presumably to be continued in a limitless future.
Unfathomable, huh? Did he also say that the evolutionary evidence of astronomy is vague and remote? So basically what you're still saying is, you don't know. Then what about just the Earth? How old is it?
I'm still looking for that fact. However, we know it has to be very old. Dr. Curtis used the Grand Canyon as an example of evolution, just as Charles Lyell wrote in his famous book, Principles of Geology, an attempt to explain the former changes of the Earth's surface by reference to causes now in operation. You see, the key to the past is the present. The Grand Canyon cannot be explained by some miraculous creation or sudden catastrophe, but was obviously done by the Colorado River acting upon rocks throughout innumerable centuries.
Oh, really? So you're saying a tiny river carved a chasm that's over a mile deep and 277 miles long, and did so by running over 1,000 feet uphill for hundreds of miles. Is this another example of your facts of evolution? God's Word gives us the true fact of the Grand Canyon. It was formed during or shortly after the world-destroying flood of Noah's day. And thank you for mentioning Lyell, since a contemporary of his, George Fairholm, wrote 2 books on geology, including information about polystrate fossils such as trees that vertically penetrate one or more strata of rocks. Such finds totally discredit Lyell's contention of millions of years, as well as Professor Wilbur Nelson's contention that, and I quote, it would be impossible to study or teach geology without the theory of evolution. Both contend that the Earth is millions of years old, but how can that be when a tree that will not wait thousands of years or millions of years to be buried and then fossilized can rise through several rock layers? Now I ask you again, how old is the Earth?
Here it is in Professor Horatio Newman's deposition. Earth is 1 billion years old, computed from the rate of radium emanation.
How do you know that to be an accurate computation?
What do you mean?
You're using that radium computation as a kind of clock. Now, if I were to walk into a room and see 2 different clocks on the wall and they both are running but seem to display different times, how am I to know which of them, if either, is giving me the correct time?
I suppose you'd have to calibrate them somehow.
Exactly. Now, has anyone calibrated the radium emanation computations by testing an object of known age?
Radium emanations take a long time.
You cannot claim to know the age of something by using a method that has not been calibrated or tested. The Bible, however, has been tested over and over since the time it was written and has yet to be proven wrong.
You're listening to Believing the Bible. This is Scott Lane with Terry Reed, Dr. Ken Harris, Dr. Carl Williams, and Jeremiah Rosenthal. If you would like to learn more, go to sabbsa.org. That's sabsa.org. Today, we have concluded our scripted enactment of If Darrow Had Taken the Stand. We're now going to talk about reactions from our panel and what they thought could have been said today.
In view of Brian's answers and questions to Darrow were based on information that he would have had available to him at that time in 1925. What has happened since then that would have been even more impactful?
I think it's fascinating, the discoveries that have been made in dinosaur bones of late, with soft tissue, red blood cells, things that could not possibly last for 65 million years.
Well, I would say DNA is the code of life. According to Darwinian evolution, life started as a simple single-celled organism, and through random mutations and natural selection, enough genetic information was created to go from that simple single-celled organism to all of life on this planet and all of its integrated complexity. But Dr. Carl, let me ask you this. What do we actually know about genetic mutations? What's allegedly created all this genetic information?
Well, so far, there has not been any mutation found that has been derived from an increase in the viable genetic information. In other words, the DNA has never increased to cause a mutation that causes benefit to the organism. Now, most mutations can be tolerate them without too much harm. But many of them are very harmful. So at best, you'll get a wash. In other words, no improvement, no real detriment. But a large percentage of them give detriment, I mean, dramatic detriment in some cases, causing fatality to the organism.
Carl, let me tweak that answer. There have been mutations which show, in some scenarios, some small positive effect. However, none of those mutations have had an increase of information. And I think that's what you were getting at.
It is definitely right. And that tweak that you're talking about is sickle cell anemia is touted as being a beneficial mutation, which is bogus. It only gives one benefit, and that is to be able to tolerate malarial infections. But even the person who has sickle cell trait is far more likely to have a sickle cell catastrophe if they go to high altitude and get low oxygen tension.
Yeah. I think if our listeners out there, if you just do your own search on genetic disorders, just look and see what comes up. They cause all kinds of things, all kinds of cancer and hemophilia and diabetes and heart disease, and goes on and on and on. And that is the reality of genetic mutations that cause disease, suffering, and death. They're not making life more advanced and more complex.
Yeah,
you had a thought.
Well, I was going to say, actually, when you think about that, the notion of genetic load, that we are actually, the mutations are accumulating and we are devolving. Life is getting worse because of this accumulation of mutations in every generation.
And that's something we see both biblically and historically. Originally, we had perfect genomes. Originally, we could have marriage between close relatives. That is no longer safe, and that hasn't been safe since the time of Moses, when that prohibition was given out.
And what about the changes in our science on astronomy?
Yeah, that has really been huge. The variation of things we find in Mercury and the outer planets, that they all have strong magnetic fields, which, if they are old, cold, and dead, should never be true. They should have lost those magnetic fields long ago. That points to them being young. There are a myriad of other proofs in the solar system. There's a guy named Spike Basaris who's put out some great videos just in our solar system of 38 different evidences that show that this solar system, and therefore this Earth, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 years old.
And, you think about comets. Comets cannot last very long, and yet we have these comets that would demonstrate a young solar system.
So I think there's a lot of information that Brian didn't have, but even what he did have in this little scenario shows that Brian could have refuted evolution at that time, and that might have changed the course of what the ACLU did later, after this Scopes monkey trial, they basically, over the next several decades, from 1925 to 1965, erased God from the public square and the public schools.
An interesting part of this whole thing is during that fictitious discussion that we set up between Darrow and Brian as Darrow took the stand, Darrow stated that the Grand Canyon was simple evidence that anyone could see for evolution and that it was cut by the Colorado River over many, many centuries. I've been to the Grand Canyon. When I look down there and somebody tells me that that little band of water cut everything that I see, I say that is ignorant. And the truth of the matter was he used what he said was incontrovertible evidence of what is incontrovertible evidence of the fact that it took a catastrophe. It took either the worldwide flood or a flood that proceeded after that for that to occur. The Grand Canyon, with all of its layers showing that it was all transported by water, that everything was buried in a huge event, is actually one of the greatest examples of evidence for the flood and for God's truth in the Bible. Believing the Bible now has a new way you can support our ministry and get some great gifts. For a donation of $10 or more, we will email you a copy of Repetition in the Bible by Jack Cassioni, which shows the Bible to be a self-proving document and shows God's protection of His Word over the ages. For a donation of $25 or more, we will also mail you a copy of Scott Lane's book, What If God Wrote the Bible, showing 6 things we should find in the world and in the Bible if God is the author of the Bible. To get these great gifts, send your check or money order to SABSA at 7620 Avery, Live Oak, Texas 78233. That's SABBSA at 7620 Avery Road, Live Oak, Texas 78233. This information for ordering is also on our contact page at sabsa.org.
Information for creation events in our area are on our website's calendar page. For more information or to schedule a presentation, go to sabsa.org or call 210-599-7240. When you go to our website, you can click on a link to our newsletter. Our website has a link for contact information on which you can order our newsletter to be emailed to you, or you can call us. Also go to whyshouldyoubelieve.com. That is Terry's website containing articles looking at current day issues from a biblical perspective. SABSA meets the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. We are now meeting at Faith Lutheran Church just south of the corner of Jones Maltzberger and Thousand Oaks. There you will find biblical apologetics and creation science teaching found nowhere else in Bexar County, as well as the availability of books and videos on these important subjects. If you missed any part of this show, you can listen to the show anytime by going to the AM 630 KSLR, the Word in South Texas website. Click on KSLR Podcast, scroll down until you find Believing the Bible. Please join us again next Saturday for Believing the Bible. I'm Scott Lane, and for Terry Reed, Dr. Carl Williams, and Ed Salzwell, thanks for listening, and we hope you found today a reason to believe the Bible.